All right, guys, you're good to go. We're live.
All right, thank you. So first, I want to welcome everybody, and I want to thank our community partners. My name is Anthony Piero. I'm the Chief Juvenile Prosecutor at the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office, and I want to start by thanking Prosecutor Billheimer for supporting tonight's initiative, the forum, and this discussion. One of the things I think that separates us apart in this county is our relationships and the ability that we have working together. And I think you're going to hear that tonight. I think you're going to see that tonight, because what this is a collaboration across agencies, and it's bringing people together, and it's talking about, quite honestly, one of the most important issues that we have in our community is our young people, and whether or not a recovery high school is not only appropriate in Ocean County, but how can it work? How can we all work together to make it work? And I'm just so excited about it. Again, Ocean County, I travel across the state, travel across the country, and I always say this, but we have phenomenal partners. The fact that we could pull this together and work together across agencies, across whether it be mental health, whether it be our community agencies, our health department, Hope Sheds Light, New Hope, and all the people that we can bring together, it always amazes me, and yet it doesn't, because we do it all the time. And I want to thank all the participants for being here, taking time out of your busy schedules. Everybody here is extremely busy, and yet here they are tonight for the audience, for each other. This is obviously being recorded, and we may use it again in the future because it's important. This is a message that really resonates in this community, and again, it's about our young people. So with that, again, I want to welcome everybody, and Pam, I'll turn it over to you.
Trouble unmuting. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Anthony, thank you for that great introduction and for the partnership with the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office, and yourself in particular. All the time and energy you've dedicated to helping us is very much appreciated. So I'm Pam Capassi, and I am the CEO of Hope Sheds Light. I'm also a person who was instrumental in opening one of the original recovery high schools in our state. So, it's very important, it's my passion, and it's very exciting for me to be partnering with this community in particular, and really important, I believe, to be bringing this conversation to the community, both, the residents of this community, the youth, and the service providers. So what I thought we would do initially is just do a brief overview. So for those of you who are not familiar with what a recovery high school is, and then we will go into a panel discussion. I'll introduce our panelists. I will ask them a few questions, hopefully again to sort of generate interest and inquiry from our audience. And please feel free to start jotting your questions down in the Q&A. If you want to direct a question directly to one of our panelists, please just indicate that in your question, and we will certainly save enough time for us to have a dialogue at the end. So Paul, if you want to bring up the PowerPoint, that would be great. I'll just start by saying that tonight's forum is part of a year-long project that we launched back in July with support from the Ocean County Health Department, and it really just to explore the possibility and whether or not there's a need and an interest, and the fortitude really to generate and marshal in the support needed and the partnerships needed to open up a recovery high school. So tonight is our first forum where we're bringing all of this to the community. So next slide. What is a recovery high school? So for those of you who are unfamiliar, a recovery high school really combines Common Core aligned education with addiction recovery support services. Those services are geared directly towards adolescents. And so they assist, and they're designed to assist students and their families as they work to maintain and strengthen their recovery capital. The recovery high school staff understands the unique challenges that face the adolescent in recovery, both on the academic side of things and on the recovery services. Additionally, recovery high schools are autonomous. And by that we mean, they are generally not co-located within your traditional public high school. Next slide. Some of the more frequently asked questions about recovery high school predominantly revolves around how do they differ from your traditional or other alternative high school. Their mission and goal is a little different than your traditional high school. They provide assistance to students and their families as they work to maintain and strengthen their sobriety through an integrated curriculum that provides peer support on site, family support programs generated through the collaborative, counseling, and really a deeper understanding of the unique challenges that the adolescents will face in recovery. So right during the school day, they're integrating, recovery support services, peer mentorship, psychoeducational programs, and if needed, access to sort of touch back to treatment while receiving, the Common Core aligned education that's required for them to graduate high school with a high school diploma from their sending district. Recovery high schools work with the student and their families and their treatment professionals and anyone else involved in supporting a young person's journey in recovery. They help them develop recovery plans, and then they help them really build on that plan to build what we call recovery capital. Next slide, please. So the National Institute of Health has identified the major challenges that face a student when trying to recover from addiction. And they, consistently state that the largest challenge among those challenges is when a teenager tries to re-enter their school. And generally that process sits at the heart of their relapse. Next slide. The same studies have shown that within the first 60 days following the completion of treatment, a student is at the greatest risk for relapse. So, while they're re-entering their traditional school setting, they're also in the most vulnerable time for relapse. And this is particularly important because the NIH also has revealed that virtually all adolescents returning to their old school or traditional school are being offered drugs on their first day back to school. And that's not reflective of a poor school district. That's just reflective of the fact that they're going right back to that old adage of the same people, places, and things, same peer group, same expectations. So that's the same behavior, and so there's not enough opportunity to sort of break that pattern. Another very commonly sort of inquiry is related to what sort of student is the perfect student for a recovery high school. Mostly that's because we're used to working with adolescents who are in crises, who may be in denial about their drug use, struggling with a recognition that there's a problem pattern or behavior. So the perfect student for a recovery high school, if we could wave a magic wand, are students who really are identifying that they have a substance use disorder and related behaviors, and that they're seeking a sober lifestyle. They want to pursue their academic goals. They want to maintain sobriety, and they'd like to do that with the least amount of lost learning time as possible. And in order to do that successfully, they need to surround themselves with a non-drug using peer group. They need to establish a new set of social norms. They need to be introduced to social recreational opportunities that don't involve alcohol and drugs. All this allows the young person to continue through their normal adolescent development, go through their normal adolescent tasks, which really include bonding with their peer group. This way, the group that they're bonding with is a non-drug using, abstinence-seeking group. And it allows them to stay in constant touch with the caretaker or who's educated and supportive of their recovery, their treatment team if needed, and their peer recovery specialists. Next slide. So ideally, a student will have completed a treatment protocol. 30 days is great, but not mandatory. We found that that was sort of the bar we set initially, and it was not a bar that we were able to maintain, frankly. And it's not necessarily something that's mandatory. The desire to be abstinent and drug-free is really the most important factor. Participation should be voluntary and supported by the students' sending district. So there really needs to be a collaboration. This is a school. It's something I really needed to learn because I came to this program, from the, community service, community-based organization and social service perspective, not from, I wasn't an educator. So most of the schools in the prior had been opened by an education institution. So for me, I needed to recognize that this is a school first and primary. The student's primary goal is to graduate with a high school diploma while maintaining sobriety and building their recovery capital. And the voluntary participation is also very important. Initially, a lot of students were being mandated to our school. And if a student is being mandated, they may not be committed to their recovery process, which can put the entire sort of system at risk. Additionally, it's important to recognize that addiction is a family disease, and the student's success requires buy-in from all stakeholders, but especially family members. So there is a large family component as well. Next slide. The other thing that's really important, and I think that's being demonstrated this evening, is that recovery high schools don't happen in a vacuum. There is a real need for community partnerships. Next slide. So, it's really important that you establish collaborative partnerships, that they're significant, that there are MOUs in place, that you are able to leverage all of your local resources. And, substance use disorder, we like to say, does not discriminate, but it affects all sectors. It affects the education, it affects social services, mental health, law enforcement. And so we need to pull from existing resources from all of those sectors to bring to bear the level of service that we need. And we cannot expect one system to fund all of that. Or, unfortunately, in this atmosphere, we also can't necessarily expect that there'll be new resources that can cover the cost of everything. Hopefully, it's a braided system of new, existing, leveraged resources all brought together to create an environment that's allows our students to succeed. So next slide. This might be the last slide. Yep. So thank you for letting me just give you a quick overview of Recovery High Schools in general. Certainly, if you have questions from that PowerPoint, please, again, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. What I'm going to do now is, before we go into the panel discussion, this opportunity for Ocean County was really made possible by the Ocean County Health Department. And Kim Riley was supposed to be on our panel this evening, and she couldn't make it, but she did send me something to read. So I'd like to just start our panel discussion with reading Kim Riley's note to all of you. She just expresses her sincere apologies that she cannot be with us tonight. Kim is the alcohol and drug coordinator for the Department of Substance Abuse, Addiction, and Opioid Dependency of the Ocean County Health Department. The Ocean County Health Department put forward the Recovery High School planning opportunity last year as we recognize the need for our Ocean County youth that have endured substance use to have access to a school specific to their educational and recovery needs, as these cannot always be met in a traditional school setting. Franklin D. Roosevelt said, "We cannot always build a future for our youth, but we can always build our youth for the future." To me, this is the purpose of a recovery high school, to empower our youth to embrace their education and embrace their recovery with their peers and supportive teachers and staff. I am born and raised in Ocean County, and I went through the Toms River school system, and I remember the feeling of having like-minded peers with similar goals as mine to sit and plan our futures with teachers who eagerly guided us as we reached for our dreams. Each and every youth in Ocean County deserves a safe place to plan their future with their friends, with adults cheering them on along their journey. The Ocean County Recovery High School would be that place for our youth that used substances and need that additional and appropriate support to obtain and maintain recovery as they pursue their goals for the future. As I cannot be there in person, I will not bore you or bore the audience with all of the data sets, because that's Kim, she's the big data brain, with all the data sets that support Ocean County youth needing a recovery school. But I think all of us can agree that the world our youth are currently growing up in is very different than the one we experienced. This is why it is so important that as we look to build our youth for the future, we also need to ensure that we build a safe place for our youth that have used substances, and to me, that is a recovery high school, so we can ensure every Ocean County student receives the same opportunity for an amazing future. And what an amazing opening statement from, our county leader. And I want to thank Kim, even though she's not with us, for making tonight possible. So the next thing we're going to do is just go through the panel, and I have a series of questions, if I can pull them back up, that I wanted to ask each panel member. And just give me 1 second and we'll get started on that. The first, I'm going to go by sector, and the first sector that I'd like to sort of focus on is law enforcement, because I believe that law enforcement plays such a particular role in helping our youth understand the opportunities that they have, but also the risks of losing those opportunities if they're not careful with the choices that they make. So Anthony, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. And I just want to start by asking you if you can, well, first of all, let me say you are the Assistant Ocean County Prosecutor, and I just wanted to thank you for being with us. And I just want to ask you if you can give us a little bit of information about the trends that you're seeing in terms of the types of drugs, the frequency. What are you seeing amongst our youth?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. I know, again, Prosecutor Billheimer unfortunately could not make it tonight, but really just supports this initiative and asked us months ago to, as you know, to get together and to look at that data, to look at the need, to look at how we could be supportive of the program. And I want to start off just personally, and I'll do this very shortly, that I am the chief juvenile attorney. As I said, I'm an assistant county prosecutor. I've been that since 1999. And the majority of that has been dealing with juvenile offenders and juveniles that present themselves to our courts. And over those years, you see the trends, right? You see the type of young people that are coming before the court, and a large number of them have substance abuse issues and present to us with those issues and continue to struggle with those. And one of the biggest hurdles, and Pam, you said it in the presentation, is how does school work with somebody who's in recovery or trying to be in recovery? How does school fit in when somebody goes inpatient and is then being returned to the community? And how do these things work together? So when I was approached by the prosecutor about the concept of a recovery high school, I said without question, it's something that we should explore and look at in this county, and I think it would work in this county. Because the trends that we see are that young people struggle with substance abuse. We see people show up in our courts. We see them show up in our community. We see them, unfortunately, show up in overdose statistics, Narcan statistics. We see them show up even when the offenses are unrelated to drugs themselves. When you begin to peel back the onion, you see a substance abuse underlying issue that then causes other issues that present in other more serious ways. And I think the juvenile court, and it's presented me with this great opportunity to become familiar with that, right? And to really become educated about what young people need. And I think this is exactly what certain young people need. In terms of the drug trends, two of the substances we see all the time are alcohol and marijuana. We have struggled with those since 1999. There's nothing new about that. I think when we look at our data, alcohol and marijuana continue to drive our substance abuse issues in this community. But I'll tell you, we have seen personally over the years, young people who struggle with cocaine. We have seen young people struggle with heroin. We've seen young people that struggle with marijuana that is laced with other substances, and they become addicted to those substances or begin to struggle with those substances. And all of those things, again, present as they did years ago, they present today. And again, quite honestly, though, the drug trends have remained pretty steady. What has changed, I would suggest, is we're paying more attention to it, right? We're looking at that data so much more now than we did in the past. And we're actually realizing, and I could speak from experience of handling some of these cases, we're seeing very young people come into our system already abusing heroin, for example. We see young people in the juvenile system who are released onto some level of supervision, and unfortunately, we get word that they've overdosed and they're now in the hospital getting treatment, or they're struggling despite that supervision. And again, that's been consistent over the years. And I think we do great work in the juvenile system, but I think this is a missing piece, because when these drug trends meet with, as you said, and I think, Pam, of course, you said it better than I will, but when they meet with that education component, we often see that fail. We often see that fail. And I think people struggle in that sense. So again, unfortunately, one of the things that I know we talk about all the time is that drug abuse and does not start at 18. And it's unfortunate, and we can make such great impact when we work with our young people to commit to the recovery that you're talking about. Because you're right, law enforcement, oftentimes we get involved and we are that person that's going to say, there are really negative consequences to this behavior. There are really negative things that can come from this behavior. And I want to be clear that it's not all, it doesn't all show up in a charge that's substance related. Some of the delinquency that we see is substance related, but it's a burglary because somebody's stealing something for money, or it's a shoplifting for the same reason, or unfortunately it becomes even more serious because somebody who's trying to obtain substances have put themselves at risk, and now they're hurt by somebody who's selling substances. And you see this all the time. And so our drug trends are, like I said, pretty consistent with what I think are the people listening would expect. Alcohol, marijuana, and heroin, cocaine across the board. I'm sorry, Pam, you're muted.
Sorry. So I feel like you present a window of opportunity. There are multiple times throughout an adolescent's experience with drug use where there may be these window of opportunities, but your office in particular and law enforcement in particular, has this opportunity to really use the motivation, the concern that someone might have that they've now had an incident with law enforcement. And so having a tool like a recovery high school as an alternative to a more punitive approach, is that something that you feel would be beneficial, or, do you believe that there needs to be a consequence that, might be a little more stringent?
No, I think that's a great question. And you said it, right? Not only is law enforcement prepared to step in, but the juvenile system in particular, one of the primary goals is rehabilitation. I say this all the time, right? My goal is rehabilitation. Now, is there accountability? Sure, of course, but accountability comes in varying ways, right? Accountability could be the fact that you're not going to your high school, right? That could be accountability by itself. And I think we have to always look at options. There is very few times in my career that I've said we don't need that option, because the more opportunity we have, the better our results will be. The more options we have, the more we can do, because we are looking for programs that work, things that work. again, success to me is somebody who goes on, right, and actually does recover and commits themselves to that and lives in sobriety and does all the things that we want them to do. If that's happening, the juvenile system doesn't need accountability in the traditional sense of consequence and punishment. I think we can do that in the scope or in the concept of rehabilitation. I think we try to do that all the time.
It's such a great point. Thank you for using the term rehabilitation as opposed to punitive, because that's, that's clearly the work that you're doing. And that's also what the high school is hoping to provide you as an option, when you're working with young people. I know, just switching sort of to the community partnership perspective, I, know that it's so valuable for us to receive data from you, to have the leverage, of the influence of your office to help, push our agenda. Beyond those things, and this will sort of be our last question, how do you see our partnership really, what can you lend to the partnership beyond, because those are huge and I appreciate them.
Yeah, and I thank you for asking that question. And Prosecutor Billheimer and I have spoken about this a number of times. And I'm doing a presentation actually in I think about 3 weeks about what's the prosecutor's role in the community. And I say this all the time. We are leaders outside of the courtroom, right? We have a job to do in the courtroom. And I think that's what people think that prosecutors do. And we do. And we do a phenomenal job of it. And obviously the prosecutor supports that mission. But we are leaders beyond that. Like, we're leaders in trying to organize meetings. We're leaders in terms of building relationships. We're leaders in terms of, like you said, asking people to attend a meeting so that we can talk about things. And we acknowledge that, and we want that, quite honestly. Prosecutor Billheimer and I, like I said, we want to be that. We want to be more than just the people that you see in the courtroom, because we have to be. Because community safety starts with rehabilitation. Community safety at its base is about making sure that people are living law-abiding, productive lives. And unfortunately, at times, substance abuse stops people from doing that, right? And it presents a hurdle to them from doing that. So community safety is tied together with us being leaders beyond what we do in court and actually doing things like this. So we will lend all of that assistance, because I think it's what we do and it's what we expect to do. And quite honestly, it's what we want to do.
Thank you so much. I'm sure there'll be some more questions for you
Sure.
a little later. We kind of grouped our panelists together by, sector, for lack of a better term. And we have representatives from the treatment centers and sector. I just want to get so Kim Veith from Ocean Mental Health is with us, and she is the Director of Adult Clinical Services, and Deirdre Lanza from the New Hope Integrated Behavioral Health is the Senior Director of Operations at facility. And I want to thank you both for being here tonight. And clearly your perspective is very important as well. And, I'm just going to ask a couple questions and you guys can chime in, as you see fit. And I will just start with seeing if you're seeing similar to what Anthony expressed, and that is alcohol and marijuana still kind of the primary drug of choice or trend that you're seeing amongst young people?
So Deirdre, I don't know how you want to answer, but or take turns, but I would just say that very similar to what Anthony said, Anthony and I have worked together for over 20 years at this point with regard to adolescence. And I think that Anthony's right in that the child hasn't necessarily changed, or the adolescent that presents to us, but the way that we look at treatment has changed. And, many years ago, when there was an adolescent who was struggling with substance use disorder, it was that we really looked for an out-of-home placement for them so that they would be in a protected environment for a period of time to begin to gain their resource capital, as you call it. But over time, as we moved more away from institutionalization and more toward teaching kids and families how to manage chronic illness from a public health model, which includes addiction, in their own communities, there's a lot less of us placing kids in out-of-home treatment for 30, 60, 90, even a year. And so I would say that there are there aren't less kids that are struggling with addiction, especially over the pandemic. We see a rise in use of alcohol. And on the adult side, we see that as well, increase in use of alcohol and methamphetamine specific to adults, not necessarily to adolescents. So the pandemic has also changed some of the things we see and some of the trends that we see. And then just as a final thought to that first question, I don't think Anthony could be more right when he talks about law enforcement being a leader and having a place. You know, building strong, healthy communities start with community safety, and there has to be open, honest communication between law enforcement and treatment providers so that the entire community is both safe and growing in a healthy way.
Thanks, Kim. Deirdre, did you want to add something to that?
I would. I would say that with the youth that we work with, not all of them have legal involvement, but many of them do. And law enforcement is an important partner for us because the reality is that's a very, it's a good motivator for youth. I mean, they really identify, and we rely heavily on that partnership. I think some of the things that we've seen change with the youth that we work with is access to substance and access, as well as maybe mixed messages that are coming from community. The way we look at substances like marijuana. And I would also say, I would agree with everyone who's spoken, without a doubt, marijuana and alcohol are absolutely the number one substances that we see with youth. And remember that we're not working with youth that are just using marijuana and alcohol. These are youth with diagnosed substance use disorders. So that there's a distinction there that's important. And I work with youth from all over the state, and I would say in Ocean County specifically. Yes, we are seeing a trend in Ocean County for methamphetamines, also opiates and benzos and Xanax, which is important to note because those are often the substances that we're seeing being laced with other substances like fentanyl. And we've had many youth come very much convinced that they're only using marijuana and they test positive for fentanyl or something else. So I'm sure, I don't think that many of the youth even know exactly what they're taking.
Right. Thank you both. So I'll direct this to you first, Deirdre, and Kim, I'll help you guys out so you don't have to decide who's going to speak first. Sorry about that. I'm wondering if you can share with me what you think it might be missing in the continuum of care for adolescents with substance use disorder.
So again, we are primarily an inpatient setting, and we have youth come to us who have been unsuccessful at a lower level of care, and they come to us and they do very well in a controlled, structured environment, and the difficulty is transitioning back to their home environment or their community environment. And I would say that the number one barrier or obstacle that youth identify is returning to negative peers. And that absolutely, there's a link towards, leading towards relapse. And for the youth, as to hear them explain it, it's not only returning to an environment where they were using, where they knew where to acquire the substances, but it also triggers those memories of, using with peers. It's just, and to be with a group of negative peers who, are not in support of that individual's recovery.
Kim, did you want to add something to that question?
No, I think that Deirdre did a great job. I agree with her entirely. What I would say, though, in terms of, what may be missing in the continuum is that there aren't necessarily safe places for adolescents who are coming back from inpatient to socialize. And in some ways they have to. So when you talk about Deirdre returning to negative friends, I agree. And so where in our community does an adolescent learn how to make friends again, that, you know, many of them have grown up their whole lives with the same set of friends and now need to break away from that and recreate an identity with a different friend group, but also a healthy friend group. And there aren't a lot of places in the community where one, sober adolescents gather, and two, even places for them to go once they do gather. So I just think that in terms of thinking about what the community could do to fill some of these spots, it would definitely be around support for adolescents to socialize again in a way that's healthy and safe.
Some of the research that's coming out that based on the success of recovery high schools and what are the factors that are sort of helping create that success for students. The biggest factor is being able to recreate a peer group and to be amongst other adolescents with the same interest, and just to be able to be kids there, but minus the alcohol and drugs. So Kim, I'll just stick with you briefly. So what do you do then? Like, what supports can you access in the community, if not social, recreational? What else are you accessing students?
So we're really trying to help them build a healthy support system through 12-step groups and meeting people who are willing to mentor adolescents. And so we're able to do that. When the family is involved, we're really pulling them in and working through family therapy to cue in safety plans, resource plans, including them more in family activities, making suggestions around faith-based youth groups and other places where they're going to get positive interaction.
That's great. And Deirdre, for you guys, do you have difficulty, or do you have kind of go-to community supports that you look to link kids with when they leave New Hope?
So remember, we do work with youth across the state. And I will say that Ocean County has a wealth of resources, more so than other counties across the state. And we rely heavily on them in terms of when forming the aftercare plan. For a youth to leave us, it's not unusual for them to have developed a relationship with a CMO, FSO. It's not unusual to link them to in-home therapists. We will set them up with an appointment for to continue substance use treatment or mental health treatment at a lower level of care. Working again, thinking back to probation if it's appropriate, and then 12-step programs, and then of course school, which we just rely very heavily on the fact that we need all those safety nets in place when that youth does transition.
And how much involvement do you have with their families?
Extremely important. I think that you can almost gauge the success of the youth that we work with based on how well the family is included. And that's one of our number one priorities. It's a very difficult decision to take a child out of the home and put them in an inpatient type of a setting. And we're very mindful of the fact that while the youth is out of the home, it's still very, very important that the family remains engaged in the treatment progress and is receiving education as well. As the youth is working on the things that they need to work on, the family needs to receive education and work on things as well. So for us, built into our program, there's family which is facilitated by the primary counselor, and then also twice a week we have family education. So the family is very, very much involved in the entire process, and then of course too with the transition home.
Great, thank you. Kim, how's your involvement with family members?
So I would say that it's similar, and I agree with Deirdre's observation that the more families involved, the more support an adolescent has, the more successful that they are. We do require families to come at least twice a month to have a family therapy session, to gain education. We have also some support groups for adolescents. So, addiction, as you mentioned earlier, doesn't discriminate and crosses all kinds of race and class. But it also is multi-generational. And so a lot of times we have an adult family member who is recovering or emerging at the same time that their adolescent is. So sometimes it can be complex, but the more honest, healthy conversation that happens, the better that everybody does.
Mhm. So what would you like to add, if anything, to this conversation? Like, what am I not asking?
I think you're asking great questions, and I think it's a nice opportunity to talk about how well we work together and how much we care for and take care of our kids as a community. But I would just add, for all of us who are like-minded about taking care of kids and about taking care of our community, to just be cognizant of the fact that social media has also changed the way that kids operate, but it also changed the way adults operate. And one of the things that we're seeing in treatment is both adolescents and adults who are so negatively affected by the things that they're reading about addiction on social media. These comments are hard to not take personally when you're struggling to recover. The negative comments about Narcan, about addiction, about medication-assisted treatment. I would just add that to anything that I would say to this is that anytime you have an opportunity to reduce stigma and educate and support is a good opportunity. That's all.
That's great. I know we just created a workshop for anybody who wants to take it, actually, on the language of recovery instead of, the language of addiction. And it addresses multi-generational addiction, and it also addresses that very stigmatizing language that youth absorb, so if they are growing up in a home with addiction, they're absorbing all of the definitions that they're hearing out in the community. And that absolutely contributes to, the next generation of addiction, unfortunately. Deirdre, I don't know if you also wanted to add anything to that question regarding just what's sort of missing from the conversation, if anything.
Okay, I would add that we know from research that group support is very important for success in recovery, especially early recovery. And I think that that's one of the voids that a recovery high school can fill for the youth. The other thing that's really important that we have to remember when treating anybody addiction and recovery is that the key is individualized care. And not every youth is able to succeed in a traditional school setting, but every youth should be able to, it's achievable for them to get to home. So this, I think it's our responsibility as the adults, to come up with ways that are going to support success and even if they're not the traditional route. I think that's why these concepts like recovery high schools are important.
Thank you. I know that I just will wrap up my question to both of you with just wondering, hopefully there's a commitment for an ongoing partnership, and how do you see your organization, contributing or supporting our efforts? Deirdre, you want to go first?
I think in terms of ways that we can, partner is obviously we see the trends, and we see, we see the way that, youths are able to benefit from these types of out of the box type of settings. I think that we really need to remember that, part of the struggle is that adolescents they tend to minimize the use. They tend to minimize how easy it is to stop, and they don't really understand or appreciate the physiological changes that are happening in the brain of someone who has substance use disorder. And I think that it's important to be able to link with people and support to really understand addiction as a disease and really understand the best ways to treat and combat substance use.
Thank you. I know, yeah, go ahead, Kim, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think the good news is we already are engaged in partnerships. New Hope is a place that we refer to, and bilaterally they refer back to us as well. So we would be committed to providing ongoing outpatient treatment services for recovery high school participants, and then would also be looking to partner with Hope Sheds Light around recovery supports, developing recovery supports for adolescents. I think that's a wide open area where there's some work to do and exciting work to do. And so we would be looking to partner in any way we could. The other, I think, thing that we have to lend is that we already run a 40 student special services school. And so we may be able to lend some ideas around fiscal responsibility and those kinds of things. So I just really see some good partnerships there.
Thank you. Yeah, I just my experience that the continued partnership in terms of the continuity of care, recovery is not linear. So oftentimes the student needs to touch back. Hopefully we can catch it early and it's an outpatient touchback, but we also oftentimes need to go back to inpatient treatment with our students, and being able to sustain the academic progress and reinforce the treatment, support and concepts, and then have a student come right back to school is really important for that ongoing partnership. Thank you. And I definitely will be reaching out as we move forward with this project. The next sort of sector that we identified for this evening's panel is really our community-based partners. Kim, I read Kim's message. Hope Sheds Light is obviously a community-based partner, but we also have Mary Jo Buchanan with us, and she's the executive director of the Ocean Partnership for Children, which also serves as the CMO in Ocean County. And, Mary Jo, I know from, again, my previous experience that the partnership with the CEO is, it's a core essential partnership because you interact with the whole family, student and the family, and really have insight into what the needs are and can really help us build appropriate programs. So I don't want to speak for you. That's what my hope is. So I don't want to put that, but can you just sort of share with us what you see as the possible kind of level of service? Is there a great need that you're seeing amongst the families that you serve? And, just from your perspective, really, is substance use at the heart of some of the problems you're seeing?
Sure. You're doing a great job, Pam. I appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of the community partners we work so diligently with together. So the Ocean Partnership for Children is the care management organization for Ocean County, the CMO. We're part of the Children's System of Care, so we also partner with Mobile Response and our family support organization too, and I believe that some of them are on the call as well. What I love about being involved with care management is our mantra is keeping kids at home, in school, and in the community. And that's what really the Recovery High School is all about. So similar to what everybody has talked about, we're definitely seeing the need. While we deal with kids who have mental health problems and also intellectual and developmental disabilities, substance use is one of our areas. So right now we're providing care management coordination for over 1,000 kids. I think today we have about 1,038 youth we're providing services to. And about 10% of those kids have some kind of substance use identified issue that they're struggling with. They may be in recovery, they may be using, they may be just at the beginning of exploration, whatever. But what everybody said, what we do find is, a lot of our kids are involved with marijuana and alcohol, but we start to peel back the onion, right? And we see that there are other issues that they might be experimenting with, other drugs that they might be involved with or experimenting with. And we also see, as many have talked about, that generational issue. A lot of the families have some substance use issues that they are trying to struggle through as well. So that's really what we're seeing, with our youth and families that we're providing services for.
Do you think that a recovery high school would be an asset or a resource that your team would access if it were available to them?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. One of the things that we're always striving to find are those resources for the kids and families, particularly for the kids. We know that, as many of the panelists have talked about, there's a real need for a safe place, right? There's a real need for a place where they can interact with their peers. There's a real need for that educational component where they can start to really look at their dreams, their goals, and what they want to achieve in life. And that's what Recovery High School pulls together, all of those elements. So we definitely would want this. We would see this as a tremendous resource in our community.
That's great. I mean, I'm going to ask this question. Do you think there are things that need to be added to this conversation? What, is such a pervasive disorder. So I wonder if I'm, asking all of the right questions or sort of pulling in the right partners from your lens.
No, I think you've got a lot of the major players. Certainly our other partners in the Children's System of Care, I'm sure, can be supportive as well. The Family Support Organization, has a lot of educational programs and support programs. And then there are many, many resources in our community that could be pulled in. We have a full-time person whose job is just to identify those resources and work with them. So in partnership with the Recovery High School, I think we could add those components to the mix as well.
So I sort of tipped my hand there and told you what I was hoping you would like to do in the continued partnership. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how you might contribute or how our partnership can continue to evolve to make this a successful endeavor.
Well, it's so interesting. One of our supervisors, Jillian Shiner, is in the meeting as well. We were talking about this, kind of earlier today. So, obviously we're going to be a referral source, right? We want to be a champion for the Recovery High School. We want to educate our care managers that this is going to be a resource. And then also, I think we have to look at how are we going to work with our youth to convince them, right, that this is going to be something that will help them. I think there's going to be some resistance. Some of the youth may say, that's not for me. And it's going to really be part of our role to say that, here is a resource that is really going to help you and help them along in that journey too. So once we get them there, obviously, our work doesn't end, right? We're a care management organization. We're going to continue that support and that integration. So all of those things are things that we would definitely be involved with in the partnership.
We definitely also sometimes need help with parents. They struggle with letting go of what their dreams or traditional expectations are for their children, and sometimes they see this as kind of the end of that traditional journey. Where really the students that are graduating from the recovery high schools around the state are going on to college. They're going on to vocational technical training. They're really picking up their goals and aspirations and allowing that opportunity to pursue their goals become the motivator, as opposed to what we were talking about earlier when, interventions through inpatient placement or law enforcement can serve as an external motivator that might, drive a student towards recovery. What we want is to ignite the internal motivator to stay there once they're there, and that comes through obtaining their goals. But so we might need a little help with the parents as well from time to time from all you guys, I think.
Well, here's the good news, right? Our model is to use a child and family team. So we're together, not just the youth, but everybody in the family, all the caregivers, any supports that they want to bring to the table. So, part of our work is identifying what's the vision, what is your healthy, youth and family going to look like. And if we can get all that buy-in and Recovery High School as a part of that, then that just becomes a part of the journey, right?
Right, absolutely. So thank you, Mary Jo, and thank you. Does anyone have like anything else they'd like to add to the conversation before we move to questions and answers?
I just wanted to add real quick, obviously, thank you. And I wanted to acknowledge Michael Caldwell, who is obviously on the call as well. Michael does all of our community liaisoning. He's a phenomenal resource to the prosecutor's office. Michael and I have worked together now, probably going on about 8 years, and talk about a guy who's out there making these relationships, enhancing these relationships. I just wanted to acknowledge him, obviously, because without him, all the things that I said earlier don't happen. And I just want to acknowledge him being on the call and obviously taking time. And if there's any questions, obviously for me and Michael, we can answer them together moving forward.
Yes, well, thank you, Michael, for being here. I didn't want to direct questions to you and catch you off guard, but I'm really glad that you're here. You always support Hope Sheds Light, and I can't thank you enough for that. You've more than once been my sort of contact and access to support that I need from the prosecutor's office. So, definitely thank you for that. Donna, do we have any questions? You're muted, sorry.
No, not at this time. We do not.
Any statements? It looks like at least there's a statement in there. Do you see it? I see it. You want me to read it?
Yes, I don't see it.
So it just from Karen Barrett basically says, thank you, as this is an excellent plan. And I advocate for the inclusion of internet, television, and other digital addictions, as this too aligns with Ocean County's and New Jersey's wellness initiatives. Further, I would offer the importance of a recovery home as part of a step-down process as an adjunct service. Thank you for that comment and those insights, Karen. Definitely, internet, television, and other digital addictions are really an issue with our young people in particular. I'm not familiar if you want to continue chatting on recovery home. I mean, I don't want to assume incorrectly, but is that an opportunity for young people who may not be able to go back to, just like it's difficult to go back to their typical high school, there may be active addiction in the home? No, I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, or does anyone on the panel, are you familiar with recovery homes? I don't know if you're still with us, Karen, but thank you for adding those comments. Anyone else? Well, then I will thank our audience for being here this evening, and especially thank all of our panelists and the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office. I want to thank Paul, our silent partner back there, who made everything happen for us this evening. I know I couldn't have done this without you, Paul, so thank you as well. And I look forward to our continued partnership. Let me just mention that we do have school partners. I think it dawned on me that I do want to just add before we close out that we have some very actively involved school partners, and they just were unable to attend the session this evening. So we didn't forget about our school partners. So if there are no other questions, again, just thank you for the evening, and I look forward to our continued partnership.
So I want to thank everybody for joining tonight. The Ocean County Prosecutor's Office has a lot of great partners, and we sponsor a lot of great groups and programs. For more information on our sponsors and the things that we do at the Prosecutor's Office, please visit our website at ocponj.gov. Not only can you get resources and information off our website, but you can also follow us on social media at ocponj. And from there, I'm going to end the meeting. I'm going to stop the recording.